Welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. Thank you for listening and supporting Spits and Suds. Stick tap to all of you. We're going to go to Vegas for a different perspective. And joining us, she's our favorite goaltender, Lindsey Brown, formerly of Ohio State and also St. Anselm, now covers the Vegas Golden Knights out in Sin City. First of all, congratulations to your Buckeyes. I know you played there for a year. Our own Hannah Bilka from Capel was part of that national championship team, now with Team USA. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a glorious year that I spent on High Street and amongst the Buckeyes, and their head coach, Nadine Muzerall, is someone that I know really well. One of the toughest coaches to play for, but you can't argue with how she runs things, because ever since she joined up there and became at the helm, they've been either in the national championship or winning them. So nothing but congratulations to them as they beat up on everybody in women's college hockey.
You won't say it, but I will. You were ECAC Goaltender of the Year. Just before we get started into stars and Knights and all the craziness that's happened, if the PWHL was around when you were playing, would you have looked at things differently? Like, wow, this could be a career path for me?
Well, I'm not sure, because if you look at it right now, with it starting with 6 teams, there are some unbelievable goaltenders that would certainly be picked 10 times out of 10 and twice on Sundays if I was throwing my name in the ring. But I'm so enthused with what the game has turned into, because, as you know, they've had split leagues for a while with the NWHL, and then was the PHF, and there was the CWHL, and there was the Dream Tour, and finally there's one league. And while goal totals are down, I think that's a direct reason for the unbelievable goaltending that's displayed across the entire league. And I can't wait to see it grow. I love that they've allowed the women to be physical. There's checking, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge thing. Every women's sport has their own hammer to the glass ceiling that's kind of shattering across the bow here. But I think for a long time, women's hockey players have been kind of treated with silk gloves, and you can't play physical, you can't do that, your bodies can't sustain that. And I think it's just untrue. I think physicality is something that naturally comes, I'd say, by not teaching girls how to take checks and how to look out for them, puts them in greater danger as they get older, because aggression happens. You're competing, and it's just part of the game. And so I'm so happy to see what they've been able to accomplish, and who knows what the limit is right now, because basketball is leading the way. College basketball, WNBA, has been after it for years, and so I'm excited to see just how my community furthers that cause.
So when we were talking yesterday, and all of a sudden it comes down after morning skate, Bruce Cassidy says Logan Thompson is going to become the backup goaltender. We've always talked about playing 2 goaltenders. Aiden Hill gets the start. And a lot of us in Dallas are like, wow, if you name top 4 players in Vegas right now in this series, Logan Thompson certainly has to be one of them. But from a Vegas perspective, was it a surprise?
I guess it's a surprise, but to be honest, if it's for the reasoning that I would make, it makes a lot of sense, because you're absolutely right. Logan Thompson has been a huge reason why this series is where it is. And, these are 2 rosters that have been building themselves for years. And with what Logan turned in, I think it was game 3, that was the unbelievable performance.
Yeah.
And it's tough to sit him down 2 games later, but you guys saw the same thing I did, where there's a scouting department in Dallas, and everybody's got a scouting department these days, but they are executing at a higher level, especially when aiming for Logan Thompson's ears. Now, Logan Thompson is a very long goaltender, but if you look at him in his stance, he makes himself very small. He uses that to be an explosive player. He uses that to spring away. It creates some problems for post play, for post integration. That means like how you're setting your body up along the post. And when something gets out on you, where we can aim and be damn near on the goal line, near the boards, and that's going to be a legitimate scoring chance, if not a goal, I can understand the switch, because Aiden Hill has a lot of experience. He hasn't played that well down the stretch. He's dealt with a lot of different injuries, but I just think that Vegas was more willing to deal with a netminder who could take care of those shots that he should, and filtering that out in front, those high danger chances. I know those stats don't look good for the Golden Knights either, but I just think they needed to change something, and they went up and down the lineup. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Logan Thompson some other time. I don't think it's going to be tomorrow, but if they ended up progressing through this series, I think anybody would be on the table. But this series is not where it is because the goalies are playing poorly. It's actually because the defenders, who the Golden Knights are built around, have been playing so poorly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because the first two games, and that was the storyline here in Dallas, we were talking about it on 105.3 The Fan, can't get through these defenders, not to mention can't put screens on Thompson because you can't get to the front of the net, and they're wearing you down. And just taking advantage of those small mistakes, like in game one, Sam Steele high stick, and all of a sudden go on the power play and take the lead, and then go into that defensive mode like Vegas is so good at. Why have there been so many defensive breakdowns that have led to Stars wins after game two?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just the lack of playing time that this roster has with one another. You know, they go out and they acquire Noah Hannafin, which I think is one of the best moves the Golden Knights have made in years. And we all know how they like to be at the front of the line when it comes to making their team better. But they've stuck him with Alex Pietrangelo. And for me, that's two alphas that don't know when to go. And when one does decide to go, it relegates the other into that I need to stay here in case things go awry mode, right? Like, that's what you have stay-at-home defensemen for, like Brayden McNabb, like Zach Whitecloud, who was taken out of the lineup yesterday, like Ben Hutton, who they ended up pairing with Noah Hannafin on the third pair that in last night's game. And they've kind of bullishly tried to make that work a little bit too long. And to me, Alex Pietrangelo has not been at the top of his game. You can tell by the way he's making decisions. He's always been a guy that's been willing to jump up in the play. And he's had to do that a lot this year because of just all the injuries that the Golden Knights have had. There hasn't really been a stretch of games, let alone a game. You're like, you know what? That's a consistent 60-minute effort. And when you have that disjointedness, your stars have to step up and sometimes play hero ball. And Alex Pietrangelo is one of those guys. But ultimately, that ends up disrupting the timing and everything else for everyone else. In addition to the rest of the lineup not having the continuity either. You know, Mark Stone was out for large portions of this season, as everybody knows. Jack Eichel was out. Like, there's been so much switching that I think they're running into a team like Dallas, who have done their own homework on trying to improve themselves, whether that's going out and getting Matt Duchene or getting Tanev at the deadline. But for the most part, this core has played together and lost together and suffered together. And you're seeing the young stars finally come out and perform. You know, Jason Robertson was a guy who had a really tough time getting going last year until the back half of the Golden Knights Stars series. You know, that's 2 rounds of hockey that you were expecting scoring from him, but he's in there. Wyatt Johnston has been on fire. The stank oven. I know it's not how you say his last name. That's how I'm going to say it until the end of time. But there's a support there that is at the command of the Dallas Stars and their ability to, I think, switch gears that the Golden Knights don't have right now. Like, the Golden Knights are trying to hit themselves into wins right now. And they've had, I think, at least 40 hits in each one of these games of the series. And Dallas was matching that through the first 2 games. But then you see all of a sudden they cut that in half. We're not so worried about expending energy that way. We're not so worried about putting ourselves out of position. We'll answer the bell when it's needed, but it just seems like there's a better command of that locker room and their ability to say, okay, we're just going to go 2 percentage points to the left, and that's going to chart our course. And when you have just the disruption that the Golden Knights have had, it's hard to make those adjustments. And so it starts from their D-core and between Pietrangelo and then Shea Theodore, who I think has had a really tough series as well. Those are 2 guys that you need, that you pay, that you rely on to be the ones that stir the drink and shut down things in their defensive zone, and they haven't played to the level that's necessary.
I've also thought, and it hasn't really been talked about, but the absence of Nicholas Hague, 6'6" defenseman, who I have always thought played really tough against Dallas, and that big body has always given some trouble. So, you know, when we talk about that, he hasn't been available for the last 3 games, so that's something to talk about. And I wanted to ask you, as far as from a perspective, Wyatt Johnston from the Vegas perspective. Here in Dallas, we just shake our head in a good way, rarely makes mistakes, good in the face-off dot, seems to be improving every year. I'm using the name Patrice Bergeron. I know it's early, but, I mean, he's not even 21, Lindsey. From a Vegas perspective, what are you seeing?
I think you can see shades of that. That's a big comparison to make on somebody so young, but what you notice about these teams that have youngins that can emerge in a well-rounded form, it's because they don't have to do it themselves. Like if you're a superstar on a team, and it's not like he was picked in a superstar slot, if I'm not mistaken, right? He wasn't technically a chosen one towards the top of the first round. He was
a COVID
up there,
guy,
but right. And so you have an unbelievable core where Seguin and Ben are aging and what they're doing, and Pavelski, but they had to give way for these young guys to take that step. And I think that insulation, I think the fact that you do have Jason Robertson on that team, him being kind of the one that everybody likes to focus on, and for good reason. I love that kid and how hard he goes to the net. And if you give him a shot in the slot, he's probably going to hit it, and they're going to move those shots around. Like there's no favoritism when it comes to a lot of these young guys with skill where they can do it a bunch of different ways. But just seeing what Wyatt's been able to do, and sometimes it's great to be young because you don't really know what to be afraid of. And for him to put on that display in Game 3 and to shoot the shots that he did and take those chances, that's a player that's playing free, right? That's like the ultimate area that you want to get to, where you're not thinking and you're just reading what the play gives you and taking what the play gives you. And I think he's done a great job, and credit to the team for creating that insulation where these kids can thrive and grow together, because I don't think anybody had on their bingo card that Joe Pavelski would be as quiet as he has been in terms of the score sheet. But that's the amazing thing for how great he was last year. Don't you think the team is in a much better spot than they were last postseason in terms of production and the health of it and the confidence? I talk a lot about with the Golden Knights when they've struggled or in their previous builds that didn't end up in a championship, is that there's certain ways to build your confidence as a player. You're going to get a lot of juice when you're scoring goals, but that's not a consistent well you can go to. You have to get something out of making good breakout passes. You have to get something about going through a good forecheck and creating a turnover, a pressure. Like you build your game and your confidence through that. And if you're trying to skip all those steps because you're cherry picking and try to go score a goal, that well is going to dry up eventually. And if you're left with nothing else and you don't know how to go through the steps and the beats of building those little micro doses of confidence, you're going to be in a really tough spot. And so I think a well-rounded game to me is more valuable than a goal scorer's game. I mean, just ask Toronto, right? They got nothing but goal scorers up there.
Yeah.
But every single year, when people start pushing on them and they make things tough, and all of a sudden those looks in the slot, you might get them, but there's going to be hell to pay for it, and they're not willing to pay the price. You're not going to go where you want. And so I think Wyatt has a great roadmap, and he's followed it incredibly well.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up on last night's post podcast after the game, there were a couple of situations that I think are small little momentum swings that can make a massive difference. The hit on Stankoven in Vegas, and Jamie Benn immediately with a big hit on McNabb to kind of quiet
the biggest guy they got.
Yep,
Literally the biggest hit guy they got.
I think he was hitting him regardless. And the puck just happened to be with McNabb, who I actually think is having a good series. And
absolutely.
The second was last night, Vegas scores, but Dodonov immediately responds, former Vegas Golden Knight. And all of a sudden, crowd back into it, and Stars end up taking the lead. So I thought those were two small nuances of a bigger picture, but, not allowing Vegas to gain momentum, whether it's crowd cheering or taking a lead. I also wanted to ask you about the refereeing last night on both sides. I thought it was very, very... It was just a tough game. Sean and I were talking about it. And, we don't like to say referees determine the outcome, and we don't think it did in this case. But at the same time, calls against Vegas and calls against the Stars, whether it's a trip that was more hitting the stick against Vegas, a Mark Stone interference that I didn't see against Wyatt Johnston. Or,
Wyatt kind of do-si-do, chicken-armed him a little bit into it. But that's part of the skill. That's part of the deception. Sometimes you just got to look like you're getting penalized upon rather than actually doing it.
Yeah, or goaltender interference on Joe Pavelski.
Yeah,
which was
that's
interesting.
His house. Well, especially with goaltender interference being as controversial as it is, I would like to protect my people, but there's certainly a lot of questions because it's just so hard. Because I feel like when you call one penalty, there has to be some sort of balancing act, because otherwise you start getting people, well, they're in favor of this squad. This is what they don't want, these games decided by uneven amount of penalties, right? And so I think also the Pietrangelo one, just by the letter of the law, he got out pretty easily. Like if that would have been an elbow, that's a completely different consideration. I think it's a dumbass penalty to begin with. But then Tyler Seguin also leaves his feet when he goes across and hits Shea Theodore. If he doesn't hit him with his back and it's with any other part of his body, I think Tyler Seguin might be having a phone call with Gary Bettman. So it's like, this is the time of year where the lines get very blurry on what's allowed and what's not, what's too much and what's too little. And so as long as it's falling on either side and those chances are being given, I'm all for it. I think the Golden Knights have done themselves such a disservice with dumb penalties from mostly Alex Pietrangelo, but this is a team that they couldn't even connect on passes for a lot of the time last night. In that third period, my God, the neutral zone blue lines, like the blue line, the most vulnerable place to turn pucks over is within 6 to 7 feet of either blue line. And Vegas couldn't even enter the zone on time because everybody's like, are you going to go? Are you going to go? Are you going to go? And then the off chance that the hockey gods do allow them to stay on side, they pull up within 3 feet and then they're trying to make a lateral pass. Like there was 3 guys that Dallas was sending to a high screen to basically make this happen. And it just seems like Vegas doesn't have the mentality right now to go play that physical game that's necessary. Not the ones where we're going to cheap shot backhand someone across the face behind the whistle, but take a hit to make a play, drive that puck down low. And so I think there's frustration with all of that, but it's something that has come to hurt them. And I think their power play hasn't been that great either. I know William Karlsson has been banged up. If he's so banged up, I don't know why he's on the power play. I can understand put him out there for the PK, but you want people that are at the peak of their powers in order to, get something out of those extra man chances, which the goals are the ultimate goal. But the real thing that you're trying to get at is building that momentum, holding your opponent down, making them tired so they take more penalties. And so it's about taking the right kind, right? There's good penalties and there's bad penalties.
And net front presence too. I mean, we saw it in game 1. Hurdle was so impressive, and, basically Esa Lindell couldn't handle him, to the fact that the Stars had to switch, and you saw Chris Tanev take in front of the net and move Lindell to the side but we really haven't heard from Hurdle since.
There's no zone retention. Like like I was saying, they can't even get the puck low. And it's, even if they do, it's like one little second and then it's going the other way. In order to have Thomas Hurdle, in order to have Mark Stone be able to camp out in front of the net like they want to, you have to hold the Dallas Stars in their defensive zone. And they've just done such a good job, Dallas, of expediting those breakouts, but also Vegas hasn't done a good enough job to earn that ice. They haven't been getting into the interior. I know there's some crazy stats out there from last night's game about high danger chances against for Vegas, and then it was like 20-0 in that second period. And so that's sort of people always think it's so automatic that people are going to work with one another, that, you can return from injury and they're going to come back and they're going to be able to fly and be great. Like, maybe, but there's also a team on the other side that you have to work against. It's not just connecting tic-tac-toe. I mean, I saw a 3-on-0 the other day, Gavin. Like, how the hell does this happen? And that's miscommunication. That's missed assignments. That's people not playing hygienically with their skating. You're overskating things, and it's not great. It's not great. And so when you don't have those little things going for you in the building parts of the zone, that being your defensive zone and the neutral zone, I don't know how you could expect to get the grimy goals in the offensive zone because you're not willing to pay the price to go get them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so strategy for Game 6, as we tape this tomorrow night, what does Vegas need to do to tie this series at 3?
Vegas needs to stop focusing on hitting everyone. They need to get their heads on straight first and foremost. And I would expect like this is going to be their last chance, right? Like if there's a time to bring your most disciplined game, this is the time to do it. But I would expect, some more line jumbling. I would rather them gravitate towards continuity and consistency over providing a spark. That's what Pavel Dorofeev was supposed to do yesterday. I would rotate him out. I bring Kolesar back in on that fourth line, and then I'd move Brett Howden up with Chandler Stevenson and Mark Stone, and then get that Conn Smythe winning line of Eichel, Barbashev, and Marchessault out there, and hope to God that the defensemen figure it out. I would like to see Noah Hannafin play with Braden McNabb personally, and Shea Theodore be moved down to third pair, just because I don't think that I was saying on my podcast earlier, if it wasn't such a big game, I'd put him up in the rafter. I'd put him up in the press box. But you can't do that at this juncture. You got to live or die by the people that have been groomed and put in place to find their game and to play the style that Bruce commands, which is enduring in their defensive zone, not taking the easy plays out, not cherry picking, and being willing to go dump that puck in or drive that puck down low and just get below that goal line. That low to high is so important to their offense, and they just haven't been able to get to it for a couple of games.
Do you think we'll see Anthony Mantha?
I don't think so. I don't notice him out there.
Yeah.
And like for somebody who's such a massive human being, it just it's hugely problematic when somebody as big as he is doesn't really show up, doesn't really register as even someone that's skating around. Not even talking about stat wise. And so I think they go back to that fourth line that has brought them a lot of success with Carrier, Waugh, and Kolesar, and go from there.
All right, and finally, Minnesota native Jake Oettinger, Minnesota native. What are your thoughts on the Stars netminder thus far?
What a bounce back, right? Because I think that he was really vulnerable after last year, and you could say, well, he's had a great regular season, he's had time to pass. Well, just ask Connor Hellebuck, how's that going for him?
Yeah.
About how you can get into these little psychological pockets where all of a sudden the beach ball seems like you can't even deal with that. I think he's done great. I think he's been served well by the fact that Vegas hasn't been able to get up in his kitchen. I think that the Stars are earning the bounces, like that Jason Robertson goal last night where he shoots it, it gets blocked on, it goes right back to him.
Yep.
Like that's where I go, hockey karma 101. If you're not doing the right stuff, that bounce doesn't go directly back to him because everybody was reading that play. And then all of a sudden, because that one gets blocked, everybody's timing is off. And so sometimes the hardest job the goaltender has is to not see shots and staying in a game. And I know that he talked a lot about being on the opposite end of Logan Thompson the other night where in that overtime and just seeing the other side, how hard they're working, how well they're playing. It's like, oh, I better be ready. I better be good to go. But his mentality, I think, is really shown through. And I'm just such a huge fan of him, especially when you're, he's in battle bot mode, right? He's so good in tight. And it's about having those bodies in front of him to push him out. And I think the Stars finally have that brawn that I think is necessary for them to succeed in this series. And then obviously I don't want to look too far ahead, but there's another team that's pretty big and pretty fast that likes to get up in the grill too, especially when Nathan McKinnon is crashing down from the top. And so that was the big difference for me a couple years ago in Colorado when Vegas beat them, I think in the second round, is when Bowen Byram was out there. They still had Eric Johnson. They had, a lot of really skilled players, but they would get pushed around in front of their net. And I think Dallas has done the right evolution and kind of calibrated their six where they can stand up. You're not going to push anybody around, and that allows Jake to be his best self, to see those pucks as much as possible and to make highlight reel saves that pump your team up and hopefully propel them to a goal or better.
When you're watching, and I'm asking you as a former Division I goaltender, what I love about Jake is if he lets one in and a lot of fans say, oh, that's a soft goal, I think stylistically, a lot of goals on Jake Oettinger might appear as though they're softer than they actually are. But at the same time, his just emotion stays the same. How did you keep your emotions in check? And can you notice that about Jake Oettinger?
Absolutely. You got to have, I went to sports psychologist to help mine, because if you're thinking, even 10 seconds after that goal goes against you, still about it, you're in a tough spot. Like you have to have next save mentality, the good, the bad, the otherwise. Like you can make the most spectacular save you've ever done, and you just have to wash it away because it's dead. It's all dead. And so I definitely noticed that with him. I know that that's something that he's worked on, and you can tell by the way he moves. His core is what really is fascinating to watch him, and how good he manages that. Because if everything goes from the core as a netminder, I know that his glove hand, his blocker, I think is one of the best in the league as well. But if he's getting disjointed through his core, that's when he gets into trouble. And I just see, everybody has their routines. We have our special posts. We have our things we read in the locker room, but you can tell that he's mentally hygienic as he goes through these things. And this is his third run at the playoffs now. And so he's been in different situations. He's been the hero. He's been the dunce. And so that's goalie. People are going to just poop on you all the time. It's always your fault. So you just accept that, and you accept the toughness of the job. Yeah, and I think he's matured so well.
I asked Sean Shapiro, one of my co-hosts, about this when Logan Thompson was playing, and you could see the stars, as you mentioned, going high, specifically high blocker side, which is the opposite side because he's one of those rare left-handed goalies. And I asked him, Vegas is obviously going to see that. Will they tell him about that? And his opinion was absolutely not. You never tell a goalie that, because then they'll concentrate on that area, and that'll be their focus.
Know it. We know it. We see where the goals go in. and the thing is that the shooters are so amazing. There's certain ways that you try to set yourself up as a goaltender where I dare you to beat me this way. If you can beat me this way, you know what can I do? Because the way that goaltending, this is where the RVH comes in that whole debate. And I'm not going to explain that to the listeners, but you decide for certain reasons how you're going to play a post. And so much of this league is east to west. And so a lot of goaltenders focus on having that push, that explosiveness to either get out to the slot or the back door on the other side, kind of like that goal Aiden Hill gave up the other night. That's a different play where it's not coming out of the corner, you're on the post, but you understand just how quickly you have to get across. You could put your glove up there, but then you're going to have to unhinge your glove and then bring it back down to center in order to move. Like goalies, I always say, do less. You have to keep things as centralized as possible. And if Logan were to put his blocker up while he's on the post, which no one has ever taught ever, people have done that with the glove. It takes away all of these other things that you're trying to plan for. Now you got to play the shot that's in front of you. You can't be guessing. You can't be guessing on the pass that you're cheating. That's not great. But if people are beating you that way, that's not the worst play you can get beat. Like, especially the ones that go far side. Short side absolutely has to be better. Get that helmet up against it. Stand up earlier. I think he stays down a little bit too long, kind of Jonathan Quick style. He'll be down in his post, so the puck will be above the hash mark. I'm like, dear God, please stand up. But you're playing different chess moves. And the guys like Leon Draisaitl, guys like Wyatt Johnston, guys like Pavelski, or even David Perron used to do these extreme shots where they're whipping them right on the goal line, and they're able to get them to rise and even go far side across. You're hitting millimeters. Sometimes you get beat by the better shooters, but I just think Logan's not as mentally integrated or mature as Jake Oettinger is, or a lot of netminders. Like, he's very kind of touch and feel go. And so I think when you're getting picked on like that, it creates a bigger problem than what you're willing to deal with. But you absolutely, Sean's right. You don't point that out to the goaltender right now. That's an off-season problem. But we know. we know when we're getting picked. And he's getting picked right now.
At Lindsey Brown 35. I will always try to convince her the 35 is because of Marty Turco, and I'm guessing she'll always disagree with me.
There's a lot of greatness that's wearing that jersey, and Marty's one of them.
All right. I like that. All right. Spits and Suds. Listeners, Check her out at Lindsey Brown 35. What a terrific Vegas perspective. Always like giving the other side and what Vegas is thinking heading into a very, very tough and I'm sure tight Game 6. The barn will be rocking. Lindsey, I've told people that barn is incredible for an expansion franchise that started in Vegas. I lived in Vegas for 4.5 years. Obviously, a very transient town. However, they come to play. I mean, I've been in barns throughout the United States, and that to me, they're in their seats. They know the game. I was just thoroughly in awe of the Vegas crowd.
Yeah, it's really loud. Everybody's souped up. Everybody wants to be on the Jumbotron. That was one of the things I noticed the most when I moved there. Is like you put the camera on someone and they're not like, oh no, not me. And they're like, yes, t-shirt off, preseason, who cares? But I've also heard them boo the team off after the first period. And so it's a very fair weather fan base, but that's what makes Vegas so great. You're riding hot and you're riding low, but either way, you're having a good time.
I mean, it has to be among the greatest starts in any franchise history. I mean, they are just like exploding since day one.
Yeah, and if you just think about the impact it has to the greater sports community here in Vegas, because we know the Aces were here, but they were still kind of bubbling up. This is before Asia Wilson realized her potential, before Kelsey Plum, all that. But if hockey can work in Las Vegas, if hockey can draw and create this rabidity, what is truly possible for other sports teams in this town? I think they're a huge part of why a lot of people like to say it's the mecca of sports right now. It's where everybody wants to be, and that's 100% true. But it's been amazing here, and so I hope that they can ride it out, because they always say the dark days are coming for you. But Kelly McCrimmon keeps making trades for Noah Hannafin. I don't know if that's true.
And Thomas Hurdle's a pretty good trade as well. So
yeah, there's that one. We haven't truly seen the fruits of that quite spring yet, but he's going to be here until 2030. So we got plenty of time.
Absolutely. Lindsey Brown is a beast. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Gab.
Absolutely. And thank you, one and all, for joining and supporting Spits and Suds. Like I said, we had a record April, and we're looking forward to a record May, and we'll be on after the game tomorrow night to give you the latest. So I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. Have a great day, everyone.